Hi, my name's Kat. I'm the founder and director of We Own It, and on this channel we talk about why public services should be run for people and not for profit, and how we can win campaigns to make that happen. And today I want to talk about a topic which is a bit different from some of the other topics on this channel because we're going meta level. I want to ask you, when do you sign petitions? When do you not sign petitions? Do you think that signing petitions is worthwhile? And why or why not? And I want to suggest some ideas around this because I think it's become really commonplace for people to say, oh, petitions are just a waste of time. And I want us to question that a bit and think about it. Why do people think that they are a waste of time? Are they a waste of time or not? So please do put your thoughts and comments in the chat. Do you think petitions can be useful? Do you think they're always not useful, or do you think they can be useful, and can they help us to win the kind of change that we want to see in the world? So I'm going to ask, do petitions ever work? Are parliamentary petitions more effective? Why are there so many petitions? What does a good petition look like? What does good campaigning look like? And what does meaningful action look like? So, do petitions ever work? Yes, they do sometimes work. I think, though, that we have to ask a little bit what it means for them to work, because maybe in this late capitalist consumer landscape, we think that we can just take a few seconds to click something and we can get what we want. So you can order your whatever you want from Amazon Prime and it gets here tomorrow. Social change obviously isn't like that. And maybe we know that if we stop to think about it. So what does it mean for a petition to work? Do you expect an instant result from a petition? Do you expect that if you sign a petition, that in itself will mean that you'll get the change that you're asking for? Or do you expect to have a longer journey to get there? So that's just something I want us to have in our minds. But do they work? Okay, here's some examples of petitions actually working. 38 Degrees campaigned to save forests when the government was proposing to sell off forests in 2011. They had a petition of 500,000 people and they managed to stop that government proposal. In 2016, We Own It campaigned and had a petition against George Osborne, then the Chancellor, wanting to sell off a range of public assets, including the land registry, and we managed to push back those proposals. In 2022, We Own It campaigned to stop Channel 4 being sold off, and we had a petition, but the petition was only part of the campaign. And in fact, if you look at all of these campaigns, the petition was just part of it. So with the 38 Degrees campaign about the forests, they were also getting people to lobby their MPs very extensively. With the land registry, Victory amongst others, we produced a report which explained why sell-offs weren't a good idea, and there were lots of other pressures on the government which meant that in the end they decided not to go ahead with these ridiculous sell-offs. With the Channel 4 campaign, We Own It, we produced a petition on that. A more important part was that we got together many independent production companies who worked with Channel 4, and we got them to come out and say that they, as film production companies, wanted Channel 4 to stay in public ownership. And crucially, we also had a bit of messaging saying, if Channel 4 isn't broken, don't fix it. So we called the campaign Channel 4 Ain't Broke. And that was really successful because it resonated with a lot of what Conservative MPs were saying at the time of, actually, this is a crazy idea. And they were saying to the Culture Minister, Nadine Dorries, we don't need to sell off Channel 4. So in all of those cases, a petition was part of a successful campaign, but by itself was not the only ingredient to get a win. But victories can be won. I wanted to highlight a couple of petitions where there are slightly different things going on. So there was a petition set up by a woman on upskirting, and she managed to get a petition that had a huge number of signatures and then she achieved a change in the law over an 18-month period. That's a very kind of precise campaign where she was looking to do something quite specific, and she was obviously really successful in running that campaign, and the petition was a key part of it. Often the link between cause and effect isn't quite as clear-cut as that. Another thing about petitions working is that sometimes we think about petitions just as a way to show public outrage. So right now on the government's petition site, there is a petition about digital ID cards, and that has 2.8 million signatures. So clearly the government is going to notice that. It doesn't mean that they're going to do what people want them to do. Does that mean petitions don't work? What do you think? Petitions are a way for people to make their feelings known, and when a serious number of people do that, government may hear that. Whether they do something about it depends a bit on the government, and there we're getting into some bigger topics around the kind of the cynicism and the apathy that people are feeling right now, which I'll touch on a bit later. So petitions are sometimes part of successful campaigns, and they sometimes work in their own right, as with the upskirting petition, for example. I want to ask, though, in this context, are parliamentary petitions more effective? Because, as I mentioned, the digital ID petition is on the Parliament website. So the answer to that, I think, is yes and no. Petitions which are directly sitting on the government's website have the advantage that when it reaches 100,000 signatures, the government has to debate the topic of the petition. So that is some leverage built in. However, the government may debate it and then ignore it. It doesn't guarantee anything. And the other thing is that people can put quite a lot of effort into getting 100,000 signatures. They may not meet the threshold, but even if they do, once the petition has been submitted and the government has responded, you lose all of those people's email addresses. So you can't build a campaign around those petitions when they're hosted on the government's own site, because you don't have any way of contacting those people. You just have that one chance with that petition. There's no infrastructure for social change happening there. So that's, there's a yes and a no answer to that one. So that brings us on to the question, why are there so many petitions? And I asked my friend about this topic before filming this, and she said something that I think a lot of people feel, which is, where's the value in signing a petition when there are so many of them? And I think there's almost something about they're so ubiquitous, there's so many petitions out there that people feel like there isn't any value. It's almost like that as a way of affecting change has become cheap. And why are there so many petitions? Well, there's a few answers. There's a few answers to that. One is because there's so many causes, and obviously the internet means that we all have access to all of these causes, and we are all part of all of these conversations all at the same time. And that can lead to distraction, and it can lead to overwhelm. But that's part of it. There are so many opportunities to have a petition right now, and there are so many changes that need to happen that many people are creating petitions and hoping that someone's going to sign them. I think part of why there can be cynicism about petitions is because organisations, campaigning organisations, use petitions to grow and to get money. So when you put your email address into a petition, if you say, yes, I want to stay involved, then you are on the database for that organisation. And I think some people feel wary about that. And, well, do I want my data going to this organisation? And I think that's really understandable. At the same time, I want to be really honest with you right now and really straightforward. I run a campaigning organisation. We are currently 4 people. We have won a range of victories over the years with our supporters. And it's only because we have people on our email list that we are able to win those victories. So I think a different way of thinking about it is, do you like what an organisation does? Do you like the change that you're achieving together with that organisation? If you think that they're effective, then maybe you can trust them with your data more than you can trust our tech overlords, for example. If you don't think they're doing effective campaigning, then you can be on an email list where you're getting bombarded and asked for your email address and for money, and maybe you don't think it's effective. So I think the real question is, do we think that effective campaigning is happening? And are petitions a helpful way into that? Or are petitions making people feel that nothing's really happening and that they're just shouting into the void? And obviously, if you just feel like you're shouting into the void, then you don't want to be involved. And so either you opt out of trying to affect social change altogether, or maybe you try something else that feels a bit more direct, or that feels a bit more exciting and galvanizing and like it actually might achieve a result that you can see. But if you think that campaigning organisations can do good work, then a petition is just one little bit of that. And in a way, it's best to just sign the petition, take a minute to do that, but then think about whether you think they're doing good work, and whether you think the campaign as a whole is effective, and whether you're getting the information that you need to assess that. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So I want to give one example. So We Own It has won many victories over the years. As I mentioned, we pushed back against privatisation of the land registry, also against privatisation of Network Rail. It was on the table at one point. We helped to stop privatisation of child protection services back in 2014. We were part of the campaigning to bring probation back into public ownership when that failed in private hands. We have been campaigning for over a decade to bring the railway into public ownership, and finally that's happening. We've done a lot of standing outside railway stations whenever rail fares go up and saying we want public ownership, and we want public ownership to reduce our fares. And that is now happening in terms of the franchises, but we obviously want to see the rail fares go down. We campaigned in Greater Manchester to get the Mayor, Andy Burnham, to bring buses into public control, which is the first time since Thatcher privatised and deregulated the buses outside of London. So that was a huge victory, and we built on that by achieving the same thing in South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire, with the mayors there getting buses back into public control, not full public ownership, but public control, so that the networks could be planned for the benefit of the city regions there. We also managed to get 11 NHS boards in England to commit to not having private companies on their decision-making boards. And as I mentioned, we helped to stop the privatisation of Channel 4. So we've done a lot of effective campaigning over the years. One of the things that we did was that we managed to get 300,000 people to sign a petition to the House of Lords saying that the NHS needed to be protected from a trade deal. And this was when the Commons had already taken away that protection, and we said the House of Lords can put that protection back in. That was our most successful petition ever. But there are still threats to the NHS to this day where we haven't won on that issue. So we, at the moment, are seeing that our NHS data is up for grabs. We're seeing US companies having a real foothold in the NHS and providing services and taking profit out of the NHS. And we're also seeing a war on the pricing of drugs, where US companies are putting pressure on our National Institute for Clinical Excellence to try to get us to pay more for drugs. So Big Pharma basically trying to push us around. So we didn't win. We didn't win on that, even though we had this petition that 300,000 people signed. But because of that petition, we as an organisation have been able to grow. that petition doubled, in fact, nearly tripled our newsletter list practically overnight. So that gave us a lot more power. It gave us a lot more leverage. We can only win campaigns when we have that leverage and power, because that's how we get people to write to the decision makers, whether that's in Greater Manchester, whether that's MPs to get them to push back against privatising Channel 4. But there was not a straight line. There was no straight line from people signing that House of Lords petition to us getting the victories that I've mentioned in other areas. So I think it's important to think about petitions as, if you value a certain kind of campaigning, you can vote for that with petitions, and you can raise awareness of the issue, and you can show where you stand, and you can stand up for your values. And in some cases, a petition can be directly effective on a decision maker. And you don't know when that's going to happen. You don't know when a petition is going to take off and when it's going to actually have impact and land in the sea of petitions that are out there and all of the different causes. So it's an unpredictable business. But I think it's just useful to be a bit more open and to say, at least for us, this is how we see it. A petition is the first step on a journey. And I think that's part of where the cynicism can come from, because people say petitions don't work and they feel frustrated. And I really understand that, because there's also this wider sense of the government isn't listening, politicians aren't listening. There's cynicism and there is apathy. And there is frustration that whatever we say and however much we show we care, that it's not getting anywhere. And that's incredibly frustrating for people. But I think the issue of petitions particularly, petitions are the low bar action that takes people just a few seconds or half a minute. And so for people who aren't very engaged, it's easier for them to sign a petition than to do anything else. But there's a whole range of things that you can do if you really want to make change happen. And a petition is just the first step on that journey. And I think that's where sometimes there's a mismatch of expectations, because maybe if you're not involved in campaigning in your day job, as I am, then you sign a petition and you might think, I'm going to get what that petition says. Or you might think, I've signed so many petitions and I've never seen the result, or I've not heard back, so I'm not going to bother. Or maybe if you're really dedicated, you think, I'm going to sign it, but I'm not hopeful of anything, which is a frustrating and disempowering experience. Whereas if you're working in campaigning, then you're thinking, well, we need to get more people on board, and that's a petition is how you get them on board. And then there's more actions that we can take once we've got them on board, because there's a bunch of different things that we need to try to disrupt and influence what happens politically. And campaigning there's an art to it and there's a science to it, and there's different experiments that we can try and get politicians to hear us and to get decision makers to do something different. And there's no guarantees. There really aren't. But we ought to be thinking carefully about how we do it. But if you're just getting an email and signing a petition, you don't know all of that thought process that's going on, or maybe isn't going on behind the scenes. So you've no way of assessing it. So that brings me on to, what does a good petition look like, and what does good campaigning look like? And I think if you're signing a petition, tell me what you think. I'm really interested to hear from you in the comments. I think part of what people want to get from that process is they want to be updated on progress of how campaigns are going, how petitions are going, how campaigns are going. They want to be told, people want to be told about the wins. You want to know if there's been a success. It keeps you going, it makes you think it's worthwhile. And you want to know that the trust that you're placing in the people who are putting this petition in front of you is trust that is earned, and that there is a process behind the scenes of really trying to achieve that change that is being promised. I think petitions that really deserve your attention more are petitions that have a deadline, that have a clear target, that have a decision-making window where someone has to make a decision and you are feeding into that decision. That is the case for a petition that we launched last week, which is aimed at the head of Ofwat, the interim head of Ofwat, the water regulator. Thames Water, which is now being effectively run by its creditors who own its debt, who are trying to extract as much money as possible and get as much money back as possible and be able to sell the company for a profit. They are trying to run the show, and they have asked Ofwat if they can be allowed to please pollute illegally outside of current legal limits for the next 15 years, so until 2035 to 2040. And the deadline on that is next Wednesday, the 22nd of October. And me and the others in the team are going to be travelling to Ofwat headquarters in Birmingham and handing this petition in person on Tuesday next week, Tuesday the 21st of October. So when we launched that petition, Ofwat actually got in touch directly. We have spoken to them on the phone. They will be sending somebody to receive the petition. They are hearing us. They know that we're coming. And so I'm quite frustrated that this petition only has 15,000 signatures on it, because I think surely there are more people than that in this country who think that Thames Water shouldn't be allowed to illegally pollute our rivers for the next 15 years. But those people aren't signing our petition. Not enough people are signing our petition. And we're really grateful for the people who are signing. We're so grateful for you. And it's a strong petition, but I think it could be stronger. And that's what prompted me to make this video, because I think we have to start distinguishing between what are useful campaigning actions and what are not, and being really straightforward with people about that. You can shout and scream and make posts on the internet that can go directly into the void, and you can take actions that will actually be heard. And we need to start developing a language around what is effective and what can be effective and what has some chance of being effective. So if people are choosing to sign petitions or not, and they're clear what these petitions are intended to achieve and who they're aimed at, and when that person will make a decision, or that institution, if they know that change is possible, if they understand that wins and victories have happened, if they understand the unpredictability involved in campaigning, if they're getting information from the people who set up the petitions about where things are going and how they're helping, whether that's directly to achieve the victory or whether it's to help grow the movement, the organisation, and achieve other victories. And if people choose not to sign petitions because it's not where their heart is, or they don't really believe in it, or they want to spend their time on something else, everyone's free to do what they want on the internet. I just think we need a new way of thinking about and talking about some of these actions that we can take, so that we don't end up getting very cynical, getting apathetic, just being distracted, just being overwhelmed. And I'm going to talk more, if people are interested to hear about this, about how we can combat those trends on the internet and how we can achieve wins and we can get the kind of public services we want to see in the kind of economy and society that we want to see. Because if we can just question it a bit more when petitions are useful and when they're not, maybe we can all be a bit clearer about that, and we can make sure we're not wasting our time, that we are having an impact and that we feel like we're having an impact. So please do put your thoughts and comments in the chat below. I'm really interested to hear them. And let me know if you want to hear more of this kind of content, which is a bit different from the content that we've been putting on this channel about public ownership and public services. But it's about how we get there, how we win those campaigns. And I really want to hear from you. And if you're not subscribed already, I hope you will like and subscribe and get involved and sign up on our newsletter if you think that what we're doing is worthwhile. And if you don't, that's absolutely fine as well. And thank you for staying to the end of this long discussion. And I look forward to hearing from you in the chat.